Hi guys, this is Cycle 1, Week 5 Art, and today in Community you are going to be going over perspective with your students. So first off, as I have said other videos, if you can have your script in front of you to follow along as I go over what to expect today in class, that may be helpful. And if you can't, if you're multitasking, that's just fine. Just tune in and listen. I did my best to kind of start with questions you can ask to warm up your kids' minds, get them in the right mindset for creating art. There's a definition of perspective. We'll be going over some famous artworks. And then there's one activity that all grade levels, all classes will be doing this week. So you will see a step-by-step tutorial of that as well. And once again, I've included a QR code. I just wanted to make it as easy as I could for you guys, especially if you're a visual learner like I am. This is a YouTube video link that I think is tremendously helpful. You will see this lady as she creates the activity that we're doing step by step, and it might just make you feel a little more confident and prepared before you dive into it with your class this week. So if you can, if you have access to that, I would recommend it. So it is in there. The first thing, just like we've done other weeks, is to start with some kind of warm-up questions. Last week we studied abstract art, so you could customize your question to be about that. Ask your kids if they had noticed any abstract art in the last week or if they've created any of their own. And if you don't want to start with that question, that's fine too. You could just ask any kind of art-related question. What kind of art have they been noticing in picture books or in movies and things like that. But really the focus this week is going to be on perspective. And so once you kind of have them just warmed up for conversation about art, you're going to jump into a definition of what is perspective. It might be helpful to ask your students what makes a painting look realistic to you, and hopefully you'll get some answers like details. When you're looking at one maybe of like a portrait of a face, then it's details in the face that make it look really smooth, and the fine lines of like eyelashes and hairs and such. But also what you're getting after is that it's not just flat and two-dimensional. What makes things look more realistic is when there's depth. And that's going to help shape the definition of what perspective is. Perspective in art, it refers to a technique used to represent three-dimensional objects and depth on a two-dimensional surface. And some artists just did so fantastically at this. I've included a few in your 3-ring binders that you get to go over if you want with your students. And we've already looked at some paintings thus far in the earlier weeks that are also good examples of perspective. You don't have to pull it out by any means, but A Sunday Afternoon on the Grand Jatte by George Seurat is another good example of that, where you have people in the foreground at this park, and then you have people in the background, and just this two-dimensional effect. People in the front are going to be much larger than what you're seeing in the back, and same with trees and so on, just physical features. So you can give them that definition, you can let them build on it, or maybe they'll provide the definition for you before you even have to. Here are the art matchups for this week. The first one is MC Escher. It is called Hand with Reflecting Sphere, and this works really well to demonstrate perspective because we have MC Escher's hand right down here. This is like self-portrait style, but he's looking at himself in a big reflecting sphere. And so right away, even though this is probably life size, he looks smaller. It's his reflection. And then, as you can see, we have kind of these wrapping around bookshelves. And as it gets further away from us, they get smaller. And then you look at, him compared to the size of this window in the back, which might have been kind of large. And just noticing even this furniture that shrinks down in size as we get further back. So open it up to conversation, maybe see if your students can define examples of perspective in this one. Again, it is Hand with Reflecting Sphere, MC Escher. The next one that you could do is A Hunt in the Forest, which is an early example of perspective showing up in art. This is by Uccello. He was a Renaissance artist, and prior to him coming on the scene, it was much more common for art to have that very flat two-dimensional kind of look, but he created this vanishing point right here in the middle and see if your students can identify how the hunters and the animals up here in the front are quite a bit larger than the ones that are back there deeper into the forest, and not because they're smaller animals or smaller people, but because they're further away from us. And the trees, they shrink down as well as we get further into the forest. So again, that's a hunt in the forest. You'll see little things that you can use, bullet points in your script to expound on any of these. Don't make it too heavy, just kind of give them a little bit of a flavor of perspective in art. The last one is The Oxbow by Thomas Cole, who was just a wonderful American artist that was extremely gifted in establishing perspective in art. And so in this painting, we have the Connecticut River Valley down here, and there's this storm that has just moved through. It works well for showing perspective because we'd be up here on this Mount Holyoke with Thomas Cole. It might be fun to help your students see that he painted himself into this artwork right about down there, and he's sitting on this mountain with his easel, and he's looking down into the valley. But we have this large tree here because it's close to us. Down here, even though this is like another fairly large hill and this river and all of these trees and stuff, they're quite a bit smaller. They're further away, which creates a really realistic image. It makes it feel quite believable because there's the depth. You can talk about vanishing points. You can expound on these things if you choose to or not. But this is just another great example of perspective in art. So then moving into the activity for this week, like I had said, it's going to be one activity for all classes. You are going to get to use papyrus paper, which is fun because we're studying ancient civilizations. And so papyrus paper, we can talk a little bit about Egyptian culture, how, and this is all in your script, that they would use the pith, the inner pith from papyrus plants in order to make their own paper. You can explain that, what's written in here. If it's a younger class and you're just losing them, you don't have to. That's okay, but you can just say this is papyrus paper, and Egyptians would use this to write down important things. It has a crisscross kind of appearance to it. We're going to be cutting out some pyramids, so that's why mine has triangles in it. And then for this week, you probably should use a disposable tablecloth. We're going to be using oil pastels, and that can get a little messy, but not as messy as chalk pastels, as you probably already know from week 2. So you can do that. We're going to be taping down their cardstock paper onto the tablecloth, or if you just use the table, be prepared. If you do that, just be prepared to use like baby wipes or soapy paper towels to remove any excess oil pastel when you're done. So this is kind of what it's going to look like. Younger classes, you're going to need moms to help get this ready for the kids, but you're using painter's tape to tape off the edges, and that's going to give us a really nice crisp outline when we peel it off. I'm just going to show you early on. This is an example of what it's going to look like when we're done. And they get to pick the colors that they use, but you're going to stay within like a realm, a general realm of maybe some suggestions, like down here, because it's sand, think about oranges and yellows. Because we're doing a sunset, think about the colors that might work well for a sunset. And maybe they are going to choose more oranges and reds, or maybe they're thinking nighttime purples and blues. This is just an example. There is a QR code. I think I did say that earlier. This artist does a great job of walking you step by step through this whole activity. But you'd help them tape off the edges, and then the next thing that you're going to do, have the oil pastels in the middle for the kids to access, and then they're going to create a horizon line with painter's tape as well, and that way you're just going to have this really nice clean line when you take that off. It really does need to be this kind of masking or painter's tape so that you don't pull off paper when you remove the tape. So they're going to start by painting their desert down here, and oil pastels blend really nicely with your thumb or finger. And then once that's done, they are going to take that off, and then they're going to do up above their sunset colors, and you can kind of just choose. It's recommended to choose 3, and you're blending one into the next. And from there, we're going to get to the pyramid steps. So once they have their whole backdrop, the pyramids are fun. For younger classes, these are pre-cut for you so that hopefully that'll make the activity a little bit easier for small hands that are still mastering how to use scissors. And it should be 3 different sizes, and this is how we're going to teach them perspective today. The one that's closest to us is going to be the largest of the 3, and then the second largest is going to go in the middle, and then the third is going to sit right on top of that horizon line in the back, like that. And so that way we have depth. It's a pretty easy activity for kids if you have your hands available to help them glue down with a glue stick these pyramids. For older classes, something that you can do to make your pyramid have a little more depth, like I've shown right here, is pretty simple too. Also, you will just see they have papyrus, just plain sheets of papyrus. I think older kids can manage this, where you're folding it in half and you're just using a scissors to cut an angled line and come straight across, and do it in 3 different sizes, and you'll see that in the video too. But what you can do to make it have a little more of depth is you're going to take your folded triangle and you're going to actually just kind of angle up ever so slightly like that. So now rather than having a flat bottom, it looks a little more pointed, and when you open it up and if you were to put it on your paper, you'd see it look kind of like this middle pyramid. So it's more 3-dimensional. And if they really want, if they're ambitious, they can add bricks, they can add shading. You can talk about where is the light coming from. And in this case, our moon is over here, which means this side is going to look darker. Perspective involves those kind of things too, shadowing and such. So that's an option for older classes, is you can just show them how to make their pyramids a little bit more realistic, but younger kids don't have to do that necessarily. And then the moon, there's a piece of white construction paper that you will find with all the other materials this week, and to help them kind of cut out a crescent moon, or they could just do a circle. That one you might kind of have to help them with a little bit, or if you want to really be prepared ahead of time as the tutor, you could pre-cut 7 or 8 little moons for them that they'd be able to then just glue on. But the paper is in there with your materials, and I'll let you guys decide ahead of time how involved you want to be ahead of time for that. So again, this is what it should look like, and then you'll see at the end you are going to take the painter's tape off the edges, which gives you this really nice crisp border. And have your name stickers ready so that you can put them right on the back when they're done. And that is the activity for this week. Please do reach out to me if you think you're missing any of these pieces, and I will try to get them to you as soon as possible. But I hope you guys have fun studying a little bit of history and perspective this week in art class.